Hello, everyone. My name is Aisha Langford, and I'm the founder of Funeral Syllabus, where the motto is make a plan, keep the peace, leave a legacy. Today, I'll be talking with Dr. Mark Evely, chair of the Department of Applied Health Sciences and director of the Mortuary Science Program at Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan. For those who may not be familiar with the term mortuary science, it's the field that trains people to work in funeral service by combining science, business, compassionate care, and ethics. Graduates of mortuary science programs often go on to become funeral directors, embalmers, cremation specialists, or cemetery professionals. The goal of today's podcast is to explore different aspects of funeral planning, from consumer rights and cremation options to how trends in the field are changing. Let's jump right into the questions. So, Dr. Evely, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what led you into the field of mortuary science?
Sure. Yeah, I'm from a small town in Michigan, Byron, Michigan. It's a village in Shiawassee County. And I started working at a funeral home there in high school and was very fortunate to have a great mentor who really helped me develop my interest in funeral service and encouraged me to pursue that as a career. I started at the funeral home just doing odd jobs around the funeral home, like yard work and picking up litter in the parking lot, and then slowly graduated to working visitations and working funeral services, going on transfers to bring the deceased back to the funeral home. And then after high school began my resident training, which is like an internship that's required for licensure. And that's when you get into embalming, directing funerals, helping with arrangement conferences, and basically every aspect of what's involved in being a funeral service professional.
Okay, well, that was an interesting summer job, I guess, to start off with.
It was, yeah, and it's one of those things where once you get started in it, especially in a small town, because you know everyone and you
Okay.
can see how people look to you for guidance and direction and help when they go through a loss, and how much the local funeral director is needed. That really captured my interest and cemented my decision to want to pursue it as a career.
Okay. And as you know, many people only start learning about funerals when they're grieving and someone has just died. Why do you think it's important for the public to understand the basics of funeral planning and services before they actually need them?
Yeah, I think, there's still a lot of unknowns and mystique surrounding funeral service and what we do, particularly related to the embalming and preparation aspect. Um, and it's sometimes in movies and TV shows, it's not portrayed accurately or positively. Um, and what we do, we certainly do spend some of our time preparing the deceased so that their family can say goodbye, but we spend much more time with the living, with the families that they leave behind, and counseling them and guiding them. So it's important for people to know what we do so that they can help make informed decisions as to what they want. You hear from people all the time that when they're talking about their own funeral, oh, just put me in a box and
Right.
bury me. And that's fine if you want to say that, but is that what your family really needs? Because your family probably wants and needs to see you to be able to say goodbye. They need the support of friends and family to come around and have some type of ceremony to honor your life and be able to have some finality and closure to be able to move through the grieving process. So it's easy to say that about yourself, but would you say that same thing? Just put me in a box if you were talking about your mother or your father or your spouse or your child. That kind of I challenge people to think about it that way because it's often hard to understand or know what it is you really need out of a funeral service.
Okay. And what kind of things can people do before, I guess, there's a crisis? when you're talking about funeral service planning, I guess, like if I'm 30 years old and hopefully I won't pass away for 50 more years, but you never know. But if I wanted to be proactive right now, what are some of the things that someone like you could help with?
Yeah, there are a number of things. So before you get to me or someone like me in funeral service, you should have those conversations with your family so that your family knows what you want. You know what your other family members want, and it's a discussion that you've had so that it's not completely out of the blue when something does happen. So having those family conversations about how you would want to honor each other's lives, I think really is important. When it comes to meeting with a funeral service professional, many people do pre-needs or prepaid funeral agreements where you go into the
Okay.
funeral home and you put down on paper what it is that you want to happen when you die. And you can do that without paying ahead, or you can do that with paying ahead. And when you pay ahead, it locks in the prices. So, as a 30-year-old, if you have the free money to be able to prepay your funeral at that age, you're saving a lot of money because when you die, 50, 60, 70 years from then, your family's not going to owe anything more to the funeral home at that point.
Okay. Great.
And then I think another thing that's really important to do is in Michigan, we have, and in many other states, you have the ability to appoint someone during your lifetime that's going to be in charge of making your funeral arrangements when you die. And that's become increasingly important in today's society where families are spread out. And certainly in those situations where people don't have close family members and they rely on extended family members or friends to be able to make those decisions. And so you can do that while you're alive. You can name a funeral representative, we call it in Michigan. Basically, it's the same process as if you were doing a will. You reduce it to a document, you sign it in front of a notary and witnesses, and whomever you appoint is the person who has the first priority to be able to make funeral arrangement and final disposition decisions for you after you die.
Okay, that's very helpful. So, with regard to consumer rights and protections, when families work with funeral homes, what are some of the rights and protections they should know about? And why is it important to understand those laws ahead of time?
Yeah, so the funeral service profession is very highly regulated, and probably the principal federal law that applies to funeral service is the Federal Trade Commission Funeral Rule. And that sets out a list of consumer rights. And so that involves certain disclosures. It requires funeral homes to have documents. They have to have three documents: a general price list, a casket price list, and an outer burial container price list. And then there's a fourth document that's a statement of funeral goods and services selected. And that general price list and the casket and vault price list have to set out all of their offerings, their services and the caskets and vaults that they offer for sale, along with their prices. And it has to have certain disclosures on those documents too, one of which is called the right of selection. So that basically means a consumer is not forced to buy anything from a funeral home that they don't want. They only have to purchase the items that they want. And so, you hear about, well, the funeral home made me do embalming, or the funeral home made me have a service. That's not what we do. That's not how we operate. That's against the law. You have a right as a consumer to go into a funeral home, talk with a funeral director, talk through the options, and then once you're informed about what the options are, to choose what it is that you want.
Okay. And how can listeners who want to be better informed, where can they go to see these like funeral service laws and their rights? So is that something that they have to go to the federal commission and look it up, or do funeral homes have to put it on their website?
So funeral homes don't have to put it on their website, but funeral homes do have to give those price lists to anyone who inquires about them in person. Or if you call a funeral home, the funeral home is required to give you accurate pricing information over the telephone. So I would say the best step for consumers is to go visit your local funeral home.
Okay.
Ask to have a tour of the funeral home, ask to see their price list, ask to talk to them about what it is they offer, what their prices are, and what the options are for funeral services and disposition.
Okay. And cremation has become much more common in recent years, or at least it seems more common to me. But not everyone realizes that there's more than one way to do cremation. So, can you walk us through the types of cremation available today, including water cremation, and explain why some of the options aren't always offered or legalized, I guess, in all the states? I'm thinking mostly of water cremation, which seems like it's a newer thing, but maybe not available everywhere.
It is, yes. And, first, I think one of the misconceptions that many people have about cremation is that if you're going to be cremated, you can't have a viewing, and that's not true. Many families choose to have a traditional viewing and funeral service followed by cremation. So cremation isn't a service in itself. Cremation is just a method of final disposition, as is burial or entombment. So that just having a cremation doesn't eliminate your options to have ceremony.
Oh, that's good.
Um, yeah, and as far as the different types of cremation, you have what we would call traditional fire cremation, where the remains are placed in a cremator or a retort at a crematory. There's intense heat and flame that's introduced. And then after a period of about an hour and a half to 3 hours, depending, the body's reduced to bone. And then the bone is processed or pulverized into what we would call ashes. What is commonly referred to as ashes, we refer to them in funeral service as cremated remains.
Okay.
Um, and then the family can choose to do what they want with the cremated remains. Some families choose to have those put in a niche or a columbarium at a cemetery. Some choose to have them buried. Some people choose to scatter the cremated remains, and some people keep the cremated remains with them. They want them at home. And then some people divide the cremated remains. You can have necklaces or other pieces of jewelry that you can have cremated remains put in. Some people like those. Some people like small portions for keepsake urns. And then some people just choose to keep all of the cremated remains together and they keep them at home because that's where they want their loved one. So there are a lot of options there. So water cremation, also referred to as alkaline hydrolysis, is a process where the body is put into a stainless steel vessel with an alkaline liquid solution. And then heat and pressure are introduced over a period of a few hours. And that breaks down the body into a liquid byproduct. And that liquid byproduct goes into the sanitary sewer system. So, unlike flame cremation, there is not anything tangible um, left of the remains. So, the family doesn't have anything that they can take with them. There are some other emerging forms of final disposition. One of those is natural organic reduction or human composting. That's legal in, I want to say, about 20 states at this point. Um, Not legal in Michigan, but it's an emerging form of final disposition that some people are interested in.
And if people choose to do like the composting method, or maybe even wanting to explore water cremation, is it more, or is one reason because of the lower impact on the environment? Is that part of it, do you think?
I think that's one reason for some people. Although green burial, I think, is arguably more green or ecologically friendly than natural organic reduction is. Green burial is simply putting someone into a biodegradable container and placing them in the ground without a casket, without a vault.
Okay.
Whereas with natural organic reduction, you're placed in a vessel, and heat and air are introduced over a period of, I believe, 30 to 90 days. So there's a lot of energy involved there. You have trucks that are bringing in the materials to carry out that um, organic reduction, such as straw, sawdust, wood chips, that type of thing. And then the yield from that is about a cubic yard of compost, which also has to be hauled away somewhere. So I think the most ecologically friendly method is green burial, where you're simply put into the ground. But people have different reasons for choosing what they do, and funeral service is meeting those needs.
Okay. And you already talked a little bit about kind of green and sustainable options. So, if people are concerned about the environmental impact, what should they be asking for? So, should they say, I want a green option, a sustainable option? What's the right word
Yeah.
for the most eco-friendly? And I guess if you could rank them from like most eco-friendly and then the next and the next for those who are worried about the impacts on the environment.
Yeah, I think the most ecologically friendly is green burial. And if you go into a funeral home and you ask for green burial, the funeral director is going to know what that is.
Okay.
Um, and that's legal everywhere. That's simply a burial without a vault or a casket that has anything but biodegradable materials. Um, and so that's going to be your most ecologically friendly. Um, and then, it's hard to rank them after that.
Okay.
Natural organic reduction is, I think, to a lesser extent, ecologically friendly.
Okay.
You have cremation, and cremation has emissions, so there's smoke that's coming out, and you're using a lot of energy and natural gas to carry out that cremation process. Um, with burial, obviously you're putting non-earth materials into the ground. A metal casket or a wood casket that has metal parts, and then a concrete burial vault. But it's what people want, and sometimes that's dictated by their personal preferences, and sometimes that's swayed by their traditions, their family traditions, or their religious traditions. So there are a lot of factors that go into determining what type of disposition someone has.
Okay. Great. And funeral practices, at least from what I can tell on the internet, seem to be changing or evolving over time, whether it's choosing cremation, planning ahead, or just seeking simpler services. So, from your perspective, how have you seen trends really change over time? And what do you think is driving some of those trends?
I think a trend that I've noticed is services, for lack of a better term, becoming more customized or personalized.
Okay.
So, if you go back 100 years, funeral rituals were largely dictated by religious preferences or religious traditions. If you belong to this type of religion, this is how we do things. Whereas now you have a third or more of the US population that is not affiliated with any particular religion. And you look at generational differences, people want their things customized.
Okay.
It's not like I mean, look at every aspect of life. You go into Starbucks now and you have your custom coffee made. It wasn't like that, in the 1950s. You would go into a diner and you had one cup of coffee and that's all they had.
Right.
So consumers in general, I think, are looking for more personalization and more customization that uniquely celebrates the life of the person who died. And we've met that challenge in funeral service. We have services at locations that we wouldn't have had them before. Whether that's a sports venue or a golf
Okay.
course or a home or on the beach near the water, whatever that family wants, whatever is going to be the most meaningful way of celebrating and honoring that person's life is what we are prepared to do. And it's not, and some people want the tradition. Some people want to go to church, dress up in a suit, and have a mass followed by a burial. Other
Okay.
people don't want that. Other people want a celebrant to conduct the service. And they want people to wear Hawaiian shirts, and they want there to be rock music at the funeral. And it's whatever is meaningful to that family. It's whatever is going to help them through that process and help them to honor their loved one's life.
Okay. Very interesting. And my last question is for someone who wants to make things easier for their loved ones, What's one simple step that they can take today to start planning or documenting their wishes?
Have the conversation with your family and put your wishes down in writing, and name someone to act on your behalf once you're gone.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time and expertise, and we appreciate you for being with us today.
Glad to help. Glad to talk on your podcast.